Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Mastering Dungeons. I'm Shawn Merwin here with the very hydrated Teos Abadia. Hey Teos, how's it going?
It's going great. I'm surrounded by beverages. It's everything a growing kid needs, and you and I are growing these days,
Yeah.
just in different ways.
Oh, we are definitely growing intellectually, socially, and physically.
Very, very
But
much so.
there's a lot to be excited for. It's a lot to grow for, to be in this world of D&D and role-playing games at this moment. So without any more ado, let's get right into our listener corner. We have two this week. First is from Nigel Rush via Twitter, who says, I have a campaign. All the characters are 7th level, and one of them died at the end of the last session. Do I start the new character at 1st level? I am worried about future challenge ratings of encounters due to the disparity of player levels. And I think if you know Teos and I and our backgrounds, you will probably know what this answer is going to be, but we'll take it from a couple different directions here.
Yeah.
First, if we put up a poll of DMs who are in a situation like this without having any other context, just 7th level party, one dies, 1st level, and ask this question, I bet the answer of a majority, and maybe a large majority, would be have the player of the deceased character create a 7th level character, and off you go. This assumes, of course, that resurrection magic isn't available or the deceased character is not in a condition to be brought back to life, because that's always the option too. And you can do a lot of fun, cool story-related things with that.
Yeah.
But like everything else in D&D, a lot depends on the players and the DM and the social contract that was arranged or assumed when the campaign started. So with that, I will let Teos have his say on this.
I suspect that historically this comes from the way, in the original versions of the game, the way that things played. Your character was not the same level as other characters anyway, because experience levels varied by class. So it wasn't a party of 4th level characters. It was someone who was like a 2nd/1st level and a 3rd level and a 6th level. And the game operated with that. Plus, there were like 11 characters, maybe, if you followed the recommendations on an adventure. So it sort of didn't matter what level you were. And you would catch up fairly quickly with the way experience points worked back then, at least to some meaningful level of catch up. Now that doesn't really work. Everybody tends to be the same level. You're probably using, if you follow any of the official adventure guidelines, you're not using XP, you're using milestones. So you will always be behind. So there are all these issues why it doesn't work the way it used to back in the day. And all of that, I think, leads to why today people would give you that answer you said, Shawn, versus back a while back, a decade ago, maybe even longer, most would have said, you start at 1st level because that's the way it is.
Mm-hmm. And so I come back to then these questions. What does the player want?
Mm-hmm.
What do the other players want? What do you as the dungeon master want? And if you as the dungeon master just want to make it easy on yourself and let that player start a character at 7th level, and no one objects to starting that character at 7th level, then the answer is quite simple. Start the character at 7th level. And if there's some other reason involved that you would force a player to go back and start a 1st level character, then that's okay if everybody is on board. And you can actually have some fun with that, right? You can have some fun with, this is the 1st level character, everybody else is 7th. So they sort of have to protect that character, and the player can get into that with the understanding that they're not going to be able to contribute as much at least in terms of the strength of the party than the other players. They can still contribute as a storyteller. They can still contribute as a world builder. but they won't be able to contribute. And as long as that understanding is there, and I would say, as if you put in a mechanic to allow that character to at some point catch up to at least where they're within 1 or 2 levels of the rest of the party, then you're in a safer zone to then continue play, quote unquote, as normal.
And I think that's what I'd add to this is that, kind of beyond the question is how you're implementing it. And whichever path you choose, put things in place to make this job easier and more fun for the characters. So, like, if you're going to start at first, then you'll need some catch-up mechanic, right? And a way to make that first level experience be fun rather than feel terrible to the person who's coming in at first and is 6 levels apart and doesn't know how they'll ever catch up. So you'll want to answer those questions. If they're coming in at 7th, you want to have some reason of why is this 7th level person suddenly available, right? Are they the typical thing of like the captive the bugbears are holding, right? Or are they an NPC that you know in town that you now get to play? And so if depending on kind of what you want to do with that, you can create more of these opportunities to have like an equivalent level character sort of in the wings that actually the player would say like, can I play that person? Right? Can I play the master of assassins we've been talking to periodically? Yes, you can.
Our second question comes from Falcon Neal via the Patreon. Everything old is new again. I am sure Shawn is venerable enough. Oh, yes, Shawn is, to remember this. In an old edition of D&D, Marshall's standard equipment used to include the quote-unquote golf bag of weapons that you needed to bypass monster resistances. Oh, wait, let me get out my cold iron bludgeoning weapon to hit the whatchamacallit. Are the developers creating this situation again with these, weapon specialization properties? Mm-hmm. And wait, let me throw my Nick weapon and pull my topple weapon out. Should these new tricks be just speed class features and not tied to specific weapons? Teos, you take this one over. Yes, I am venerable enough to remember this. And now onward.
The 3 golf bag of weapons was a bit silly. I mean, we would all laugh about it because the thing was there was so much resistance tied to monster type that you didn't want to lose half your damage, so it was worth it to keep this essentially a golf bag of weapons, and you'd pull out your 9-iron, which really was your cold iron weapon, so you could attack that Fey or whatever it was and deal enough damage. And this lasted until you landed an adamantine weapon, which were super rare, but eventually you might be able to get it. And now you could just ignore all resistance and you were back into the way you wanted to really actually play. So it was just a bit dumb because you didn't really want to do that. You just couldn't afford to lose half your damage. And, I think that weapon properties are not quite at this level. It might be a little bit, right? You might say, "Oh, nothing's standing together, therefore cleave won't work." So I'll pull out my other thing. But I think in general, this is avoiding being the obnoxious level or the silly level of it. But we'll have to playtest to really know. What do you think, Shawn?
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit there.
Please.
I think that it will get that silly, and for even less of a reason. Right. The reason that you had the golf bag in 3rd edition was, like you said, you're doing half damage unless you have all of these different weapons. Cold iron here, silver here, adamantine here. And not only that, but you could put other things on it. So you'd have your cold iron axiomatic sword for those chaotic Fey. And you could also pull out the axiomatic weapon if you had other chaotic enemies that you were fighting. So you added even more, but the point of that was you didn't want to do half damage. Now, my counter to that is we often find these optimizing players, and I'm not using that as a disparaging term. It is something that is natural to want to do. You have the situation, you want to find the best solution to that situation. But often that solution wasn't even necessary. Often doing the half damage, you may end the combat 2 rounds earlier, but it's not like you were in danger of losing. And that's the optimizing that I see so often is optimizing for a problem that doesn't exist.
Well said.
You're optimizing to find the best solution to an answer that is already answered. You know you're going to win this combat, but you are looking for the optimal solution to this very small microtransaction that in the long run doesn't add up to anything. You don't save any money in the long run. And so you spend more time switching between weapons than the time it would take to do an extra round of combat anyway. And I see what could happen with this is we get to something that's even less important in terms of winning these microtransactions, but people will do it anyway. Instead of, oh, don't stand there, we're going to get, oh, don't use your topple weapon, use your nick weapon, because you're going to end up over 5 rounds of combat doing 2 more points of damage than you would if you toppled, and only 2 of us would be getting advantage because we're all ranged. So don't, it's sort of level of thing that, while for certain groups may be fun to discuss, in the overall audience of D&D, you are going to lose more players than you gain by taking that level of specificity and tacticalness, and just completely lose track that this is supposed to be telling a story as well.
Well, and it's really fascinating design-wise that because Resistance in 3rd edition was a monster-driven thing, and because you wanted to normally optimize your weapon, right? So you're investing in your weapon. 3rd edition had this whole like magical properties you wanted to add, but you could only afford but so many. So you generally had like your weapon you wanted, and then you'd have the plain old weapon that's just for this resistance problem. And that's why you had that golf bag that way, rather than say having 3 great weapons. You usually had 1 awesome and then just the other stuff. And you happen to pick something up better, +1 cold iron, great, but you're just a plain one would do. In this case, this is a player-driven choice as to what tactic to use for their weapon mastery. And that's where you end up with exactly what you're saying, where unfortunately someone will break down and say, well, it's an extra 0.5 damage per round when you do blah, blah, blah. And it's 1.5 if you do this other one. So obviously you must make this choice. And you get away from the fun of it. It's not the fun of what you want to do tactically. It's not the concept. It's just some damage problem. And as you said, we don't even need the damage. Players are surviving and their characters are surviving just fine. In fact, maybe too much. And play might be more fun if it were more dangerous and challenging, but players can't think that way because they read on a forum or on a tweet or wherever, I saw a video that says, this is the way to go, clearly. Yeah.
Yep. And then you get into the problem of people reading these things on forums and not understanding. Not understanding A, what's even being said, but B, what it does to the game. So you can look and you can see that this one strategy will optimize your damage or optimize debuffing monsters. Right. And it may be totally true, but then you don't understand what it's like at the table when you're taking 5 extra minutes per round because of saving throws needing to be rolled, or everyone having disadvantage, so there's less damage being done, or all of those things that you see how it works on paper. You don't see what that does to the actual gameplay.
Yeah, and Falcon Neil asked this question about whether these should be features, like class features, and I do like things like this more as class features, and I think you can control them a little better because you're applying the flavor of the class more specifically. You're thinking to yourself as a designer, what should a ranger be doing? What should a cleric be doing? And so you come up with very different answers. When you have one size fits all or fits most, most martial type characters, you end up with a wide variety and you offer this menu of choice, and then folks will, of course, optimize. And that's a bit of a shame, but you can also design things. These could be things that are hard to optimize. That's just a lot more work. And I don't know if the team wants to do that work.
Right. And it limits when you make something that could be optimized, but you put a limiter on it. What's the first thing that players do? The first thing they do is they ignore the limit. right? They try to use it like inspiration, right?
Mhm.
They use it in the most optimal way, even though that's not the rule.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing they try to do. What does that then force the dungeon master to do? The dungeon master either has to say no,
Yeah.
which makes the dungeon master the bad guy, or they have to allow it, which then makes it twice as powerful or 20 times as powerful as it was supposed to be because the limit was supposed to stop it. So,
Right.
right, all of this goes into game design. And you need to think about it and how the user is going to use this thing that you're creating.
And that's why it isn't a paper exercise to do these things, right? You have to have the play component of it to see when you're doing this weapon mastery use. Is it fun? And not just fun as a, hey, this is the first time I'm doing it, but as you start to do it repetitively and you start to kind of just do it in the background, is this driving great play, right? Like I always think about the game Dominion. If you guys have played that, it's a deck building game, and I super love it at first, and it has a lot of kind of rich theme and concepts that's baked into the cards. But once you play it enough, usually people playing it are absolutely quiet at the table because they're just thinking about the things they're doing and how to get synergies off of it. And it ends up feeling almost like everybody's playing solitaire at the same table. It'll differ slightly between groups, but that the game drives itself to just be cold, analytical, calculating, efficient, and win. And so you don't end up like you do in some other card games with all this fun back and forth banter. And that's why I don't love playing Dominion as much, is because it just drives us to play solitaire with other people present.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Well, we have two other questions, but we're going to handle those next week.
Cool.
So hang in there, Hyperlexic, and hang in there, Chad Lynch, because we have a lot of news and commentary to get to. The first bit of news and commentary is continuing our look at the new Unearthed Arcana. We're not going to tackle this whole monster at once. Last time we talked about the new weapon properties. This time we're going to talk about the Barbarian. Let's do the Barbarian. So one thing about these design, this UI, this UA, was that they gave design notes talking about what they changed and in some cases why they changed it, which I loved. I love to. That's what I've been begging for this whole time. Is let's hear your reasoning behind this so we can see where you're going and see if you are actually getting to the brunt of what we need changed. So with the Barbarian, we saw that they changed first how rage works in terms of how it continues. So one of the issues with rage was we would always get into a situation where the Barbarian raged, did their things, and then they were too far away to attack an enemy, too far away to be damaged, and they really couldn't continue their rage then. So you would get into these odd situations where they would try to damage themselves or they would attack the ground. And it's that situation where the DM is either forced to say no because that's silly, or have to allow it to happen even though it made no sense. So what they did was they being the designers added a way for you to continue rage even if these other triggers did not keep your rage going, and that was you can use a bonus action. So taking damage no longer extends the rage, but forcing someone to make a saving throw does. So the focus is now on what you do and not what's done to you, which is good.
Yeah.
And now it lasts 10 minutes instead of 1 minute. And now the incapacitated condition stops a rage. And I was happy with all that.
Yeah, I think it's generally good. There is situations where certain spells and things will now end your rage because they'll prevent you from using your bonus action. But I think that's all fine too. The thing that I didn't. Yeah. Good.
No, go. You go.
I was just gonna say a thing they didn't fix because they're clearly like, we've seen this problem, we're doing this. I'm like, great, very cool, but they didn't address the issue of how the Barbarian resists physical damage types, the bludgeoning, slashing, piercing. But at high levels, there's very little of that now. All these monsters, especially after revisions to the monsters, tend to deal more fantastic types of damage, which bypass that. And that takes away a lot of the edge of the barbarian, which is the barbarian can sort of survive all this by having the damage, and then their damage output and the consistency of staying up all meant they were powerful at higher levels. But as they are now easier to kill at higher levels, I'm surprised they didn't do something about that. Because I like that model of the barbarian
Well, they
sort of
kind of,
risking but resisting.
yeah, they kind of did at the highest level when you, instead of just being at 1 hit point, it's 15th level, but they changed Relentless Rage so that instead of just if you would have hit 0, you're at 1, it now gives you a number of hit points equal to twice your barbarian level. So you hit 0, you're going to be at level 30, or you're going to be at 30 hit points at least. And you can continue to do that as long as you can make your Constitution saving throw, which starts at DC 10. So if you're a barbarian, chances are you're going to quite often pass that saving throw at least twice. So you're getting at least 30 hit points once, then at least 30 hit points probably again, and possibly even more beyond that. But I understand what you're saying, and I'm okay with barbarians taking damage. I almost feel like, especially when the subclasses start to kick in, and I'm sure these subclasses will start to say, well, you also get to take half fire, ice, cold, lightning, etc., etc. That we'll see a little bit more of that then come into play. But it's a good point about monsters doing more force or other kinds of damage. In terms of forcing an enemy to make a saving throw extends your rage. At first, I read that and I was like, what? How does a barbarian force people to make a saving throw? I guess you could cast a spell, but what does it, why not oppose checks, right? Because as a barbarian, as you're raging, you might want to grapple, you might want to push or knock someone prone. Now, that would be a good use of your barbarian rage to make that opposed check with advantage because it's strength. That should continue your rage to me. And then with this new weapon mastery system, I thought, well, at least one thing forces you to make a saving throw. So I guess that could be one thing, and that might help barbarians.
But then you're dealing damage anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it is an interesting thing.
That's true.
It's maybe a subclass type thing if you had an aura or something like that, then that can extend it because you're sort of damaging through that or causing conditions through that.
Right.
But yeah, I like your idea of an opposed
so I'm
check.
not opposed to opposed check should also do it, and then you can have barbarians doing all sorts of grapples and pushes and knocking prone, and that would work. So go there. They added the new weapon mastery feature for the barbarians at first level. So we talked about that last time. At second level, you get primal knowledge, which unlocks non-combat functionality for rage. What does that mean, you ask? I'm glad you asked. You can make the following as strength checks, even if it normally uses a different ability: acrobatics, intimidation, perception, stealth, and survival. So, my thought is, all right, I'm raging and I'm going to use my strength to make a intimidation check. Makes sense. Acrobatics check. Okay, why not? Perception. Okay. Stealth. I'm angrily sneaking. And survival. And I get what they're doing, right? They want these things to be something barbarians can do outside of combat while they're raging. I just wish they wouldn't have worded it the way they did. And they tried to throw in they tried to throw in, well, this is more about your savage instincts than it is your. I would have just preferred them say, on these checks, you have advantage while you're raging.
Yeah.
Don't tie it to strength. because it does practically the same thing, right? Instead of making a dexterity check with your stealth, you're making a strength, probably getting an additional +2 or +3. Uh, just to have advantage and use your dexterity for stealth or use your wisdom for survival and let that advantage do the job.
They're often, I think, afraid that you might already have advantage from something, and so then it's no benefit at all. Or you may wish to do something that would grant advantage on top of it, and so they're trying to switch that bonus. But I agree that like perception's sort of funny. What are you doing? Like smashing all the things in the room to look for something, right? Like moving enormous rocks to find where the foe is. But stealth, it's just I don't know. Explain the strength of that is really quite hard, and so yeah, and maybe just the answer is take stealth off the list.
Well, I'll jump ahead and tell you why also that I want to switch this is because let me find it here. At I put this in this okay, Indomitable Might moved from 18th to 9th level. So at 9th level now, you can, if you roll lower than your strength on a particular check, you get to use your strength instead. So at 9th level, you're at least probably at an 18 strength as a barbarian, possibly higher. So you never have to worry about rolling an athletics, acrobatics, intimidation, perception, stealth, or survival check when you're raging, because you can always just use your strength score. So you're always at a 16 to 18. That's why I want just advantage. And it just seems weird.
It also, and we've seen this in a couple of the playtest areas, it intrudes a bit upon the other classes. This isn't too bad in that you're probably out of combat not going to want to burn too many rages at normal levels of play. But there is that chance that someone will say, like, no, let me do the stealth thing. I'll burn a rage. And the person who would normally stealth kind of goes, that's my thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I like the idea of it. And for me, it would just be fixed if you just gave advantage on that. Because then you don't have to worry about, oh, it's not a strength check for me. It's I have advantage on my when I rage, so I don't have to worry about that. Well, I'm always going to get a 20 on my perception check if I'm raging, because it's a strength ability for me now. So there you go. Just doesn't quite work together. But
yeah,
what do I know?
Well, looking at these other ones, we've talked about a couple of them already, like Relentless Rage. Relentless Rage is one of the few that moves to a higher level, but a lot of things move to lower levels. And we'll see this also with the other classes in this packet. And that's where I sort of think like, wow, you've just given everybody weapon mastery. That's more damage. You've lowered all these damaging capabilities to happen earlier. So they're happening for more of your career. You're straight up stronger. And so how do I say in good faith, Jeremy Crawford, that the 2024 Barbarian is just fine to play right next to the 2014 Barbarian? And also, if all the classes that are new are doing all this extra damage and extra capabilities, are we really saying that the encounter guidelines can stay the same and that current adventures remain the same, or do we have to change encounter guidelines and current adventures, 2014 adventures, are no longer a challenge? Classes content?
Yeah. Yep. It is interesting. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about here? Most of it is just moving things around a little bit, moving it to a different level.
Yeah, I mean, there's more
I didn't
damage
have too much else to say
coming in, I think, in fun ways. So I think I'm generally okay with the changes. It's just that this isn't just mechanics. It really is strength. Like they are more capable. And so that's a power up. Yep. And we've seen that in other cases. And so it's like, well, what's that? How are you going to deal with that? Are they going to tone it down later? I don't know.
So, well, we'll see when the feedback form goes up what people end up saying about it. We also last week didn't talk about the April D&D community update, which had some pretty interesting information, so we thought we'd do that now. This was a blog that followed up on some of the information and feedback that they gathered during the D&D Summit. And Teos, of course, was at that D&D Summit, so he might have a little more information to add about some of these things. The first was that they reaffirmed in the community update that the 2024 core books are intended to be a continuation of 5th edition and not a new edition. How does that set with you?
Yeah, I mean that was certainly a major point that they made there. They're this is clearly I mean, at this point I don't think they can step back from this, right? Because they've said it so forcefully. So the idea is that everything should play together, and that it doesn't matter whether you have, 2 players and one plays the 2014 Barbarian and one plays the 2024 Barbarian. And so that becomes then the measuring stick I think we have to ask ourselves as we're assessing this is that really true, right? Are we still feeling like you can run that encounter that was published in 2015 and there's no problem at all? We'll see.
They also mentioned that the school program with free digital kits as well as physical kits are sold out, but a second set is being created. And they also want to find ways to provide educators with D&D Beyond functionality for free, and other ways to support these school club game programs.
And you know what I'd say to that? You have the basic rules. It's wild to me that when you look at the digital kits, they don't point to the basic rules, and they should. They should absolutely break down things and say, hey, you have a spell list in these pre-gens that we gave you. Go to the basic rules, get them. And if you really want to help them out, well, put those spells on one sheet so they don't even have to look it up. But that kind of, to me, it's all there. Just break down the basic rules in a more useful way, and you're set.
Yeah. The digital aspect of this is something obviously that's important. But one of the things that we hear is, I want my kid to play D&D because I want them off the computer. I want them off their phone and their tablet and their Switch and whatever other digital device is either in their hands or implanted in their brains. And I want them sitting at a table looking at other people and talking. Yeah. And so to point them to D&D Beyond, while certainly much easier to navigate, sort of defeats that whole purpose. So I urge them to be careful with pushing that digital thing too far. Giving it as a tool for the people running the clubs, absolutely, I think that's valuable. But giving it as a tool for the kids, or for the new players to be automatically going to, I would want them to tread lightly on that.
Yeah, agreed, 100%.
Yeah, and speaking of D&D Beyond, accessibility was brought up at the summit, and they said that they're going to work with experts to identify improvements in that area.
Yeah, I hope that includes international affordability and translating the basic rules, which to me is great. It's already free. Nothing that you lose there. Just translate those and bring in more people to check it out.
This update also reiterated that D&D Beyond would be the front door to D&D as opposed to the Wizards of the Coast main website. And so they want to continue to move things to the D&D Beyond website, although that will be a long-term project to get that fully implemented in that direction.
I mean, I hope they don't delete and lose all the content there. I've made that point in the past. We'll see.
They talked about the D&D Beyond third-party marketplace. Planning is still in its infancy, but they will start rolling updates, FAQs, and feedback sessions to creators and publishers, although they said do not expect anything coming soon.
There's so much I could say about that.
Much to add.
that marketplace is I think it's a really nice intention, and the good part of it is it really shows that the team is super wanting to be responsive after the whole OGL debacle. But I don't know how you make this work. And so when they say nothing soon, I absolutely believe that there's no way they'll do anything soon. And it's not because they're stalling. I think it's because this is such a can of worms, let alone the VTT marketplace.
Yeah.
But I think this is all, it's a huge problem to try to do this well. And I'll be shocked if we see anything this year that's concrete.
Yeah. Yeah. All of the intricacies and pitfalls aside, you and I have had some good conversations with other people, especially third-party publishers, about this, whether just the idea of it is a good thing or not. And it's so odd to me. It's funny that, you know, people will say, oh, Wizards of the Coast, they need to better support third party, and they should reach out and they should help third party publishers who are publishing things that they can't, so it helps grow the industry. And then as soon as they announce that, oh, we're going to support third party publishers, we get people outraged that they're going to support third party publishers. And it's often the same people who want support but then don't want support in any way except the exact way that they want support. It's just sort of, it's either good, or it's either a good idea or a bad idea if you put aside the intricacies and all the details, the legal details, the monetary details. So, you know, is it good or not? Decide, and then work from there.
Yeah.
Okay. They talk about events. In addition to a lot of cool plans for Gen Con, we will have our next Creator Summit at the convention in August of 2023. That is in Indianapolis, Indiana. Event details will be published right here, not right here at the Mastering Dungeons, right here on D&D Beyond. And they will also not be attending Fan Expo Canada this year, and will update their schedule accordingly. So I'm sad about the Fan Expo Canada because that's the closest convention to me of any size. It's only a couple hours away from Western New York. So I was looking forward to going and getting involved, and now they're not going to be attending there. But Gen Con Creator Summit, what do you think?
It's really expensive to go to Gen Con. And, you know, last time they flew people out, and I'm trying to think to myself, you know, could I go there? I don't know if I can. Like, if I have to pay my own way, it's an expensive thing to go all the way out there. But I think maybe, you know, for folks who are already going, that could be really good. It depends on, I think at this point, and what I've tried to say on my blog is, this is the point where I think it's now good to focus. It was good to hear from a wide variety of folks. Now get specific questions and bring people to these sessions that can answer and give you feedback on the specific questions you have. Right? So if you need feedback on the marketplace, bring in people who can give you those answers. If you need feedback on a streaming program you're going to do, you know, like you're launching this channel that we're going to talk about, then get people in who can give you that feedback. Like, start fine tuning and be prepared and give everybody the agenda early.
Yep. Okay, yeah. So let's quickly go through the VTT. The next step is a pre-alpha test with a small group of players and expand from there. And they're going to give an email that they shared with the summit attendees that you can communicate directly with Wizards of the Coast. So that was in the community update. Let's talk about this new streaming channel. Hasbro and E1 have announced that there will be a free D&D streaming channel, the Dungeons and Dragons Adventurers FAST. FAST stands for free ad-supported streaming. This channel will be available on, quote, a number of platforms. E1 has not yet cut distribution deals, according to the company. What are they going to show on this? Teos, I'm going to let you give all the highlights of that.
Whoa, what's happening, Shawn? It's going to be episodes of the animated Dungeons and Dragons series. That's how the cartoon starts out. Originally aired from 83 to 85, so we get to see that. I'm all for that. I mean, I own the DVD, but it's a blast, and I'm a big fan of it. Then they have Encounter Party, a podcast currently in its form, follows professional actors and improv artists and new cast member Carrie Payton from The Walking Dead, and it's based in the Forgotten Realms. Then what else do we have, Shawn?
We have Faster Purple Worm Kill Kill. It features a party of first level characters each episode going off and getting killed horribly by challenges that are far, far beyond their means, which I think will be hilarious, at least for a while. There will be a revolving cast, including the series co-creator Matthew Lillard. So, okay, that's a thing. They're also going to have Heroes Feast. It's part talk show, part cooking competition. Mike Herzek, I can't pronounce that. Haraz, and so he's the master chef. And Sujata Day will prepare dishes for guest diners each and every episode. And of course, there will be more, but those are because it's going to be, a streaming channel.
And 24 hours.
And
so,
yes. So that's a lot of content. Now, you have a lot of creators out there in the world, some, very popular and some looking to become very popular. So it's going to be interesting to see all of this. It's going to be interesting to see who is chosen. It's going to be interesting to see the types of content that they choose to put on. It will just be an interesting experiment to see how they do it. Will I watch it? Probably not. Or I'll watch the D&D cartoon just to remember what it was. And maybe if something catches my fancy, I may check in every once in a while. But I just can't see myself watching too much of it.
I can only imagine all the iterations this has gone through inside the company to try to think through how to do this. I bet this has been on the table in some way for ages. And in fact, one of the things we've talked about on the show is that E1, which was purchased for $1 billion as an entertainment platform, has done very little. And, we've heard recently that it's being shopped around to companies to sell off. So it's very strange to me that you would create as sort of one of the first obvious things coming really from the E1 side, this free streaming channel all focused on D&D, but you're trying to sell E1. Are you also trying to sell this channel? Are you trying to sell anything else? Like it's an interesting piece that I'm not sure how it fits into the puzzle of what Hasbro is trying to do, but I'm glad there's an experiment. This, even if it doesn't succeed for long, it'll be interesting to poke around at the demographics, at the audiences, and maybe we can all learn a little bit from it for the hobby.
Yeah. I mean, one of the rumors that it flies around always. It flies around every year, and that is, would Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro sell D&D? And if you're going to sell D&D, you want it to be at not even the rules. You want the buzz around it to be in the best state possible. And you want to find the Disney or whatever major individual company could afford, say, $1 billion for D&D, to have look, we have a movie franchise. Oh, look, we have a 24-hour streaming channel. Oh, look, all of this could be yours if the price is right.
Yeah.
And so, introducing this now and trying to make it something that could be successful in the short term, even if it's not successful in the long term, but getting the buzz about it out there just to be one more thing that you would be buying if you bought D&D is an interesting tactic that one might use.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that D&D is going to be sold, right? And I know you aren't either, but I think this is the kind of thing one does when one is fishing and contemplating those possibilities.
Mhm.
and we don't know what the execs are doing. But as the execs who have wanted to clearly put a laser focus on D&D and make D&D into an enormous brand, as they try more and more things around it, one of the options is always going to be, especially if it's not hitting the targets, well, what if we sell it?
Because what's the easiest way to make $1 billion with D&D? Sell it for $1 billion.
Yeah, we'll
It
do it
becomes
for
a
you.
billion-dollar brand right away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that is the news on the stream. We'll be very excited to see how that goes. Next up in the news is Critical Role will be launching a new stream to promote their upcoming role-playing game. So one of the role-playing games that they are putting out is called Illuminated Worlds. That's the system name. So this stream is going to be called Candela Obscura. It will be a monthly series, and the role-playing game is going to be in the horror genre. Now, I don't know if that's just the stream or if that's the game itself, because they originally said the game would be adaptable to many different settings. So they may be just taking this game that could be used for different settings and putting this sort of the horror spin on
Yeah,
this
that
particular
could be.
stream.
Mm-hmm.
So the series is described as a drama that follows an esoteric order of investigators as they use centuries of knowledge to fight back a mysterious source of corruption and bleed. Each episode will have an inciting incident that forces the team to uncover and solve the mystery at hand. So it looks like a monster of the week kind of situation stream. The role-playing game itself uses a D6 pool. There will be a quick start version of the role-playing game released with the show, and then the full role-playing game at the end of the year. The first episode will be out on May 25th, so not
Coming
very
up.
far away. And each is designed to stand alone, so you can easily watch one episode without having to watch the whole series. And this is the first show to feature a role-playing game created by Critical Role.
Should be really interesting to see how that does, both the game and the stream, and how they intersect, right? Because nobody can tie those two things together the way Critical Role can. And that's their unique
Yep.
piece, right? They're a unique intersection. So can they leverage this to finally be a really blow up RPG side? Because so far the Critical Role books have been fine, but they're not enormous, right? And it's not shattering sales or anything. So could this get to that really high level? It's perfect time for it, one could argue. So we'll see.
Yeah, that will be interesting business-wise to keep an eye on. Did you want to talk about the Kickstarters this week, or do you want to push them off to
Yeah,
next?
just real quickly, there's one called Koboa, which is a South American fantasy setting for 5th edition, Pathfinder 2, and even Cold Press's Valiant. It's an all South American team of designers and artists. It's hit its goal very quickly, which is awesome to see. Has a number of really nice features about it, so check it out. Link in the show notes, or search for Kickstarter and Koboa, Koboa. And then Mini Dungeon Tome 2 is a collection of 5e short adventures and one-shots. Friend of the show, Robert Aducci, recommended this one. The page border has in the book itself, has a smart system of color coding and icons to let you know the level, terrain type, and other features of each one, so you can very easily flip through. You can preview it, take a look at what you think, and use that in your next gaming session, or sample the soundtrack. It reminds me a lot of Dungeon Delve in its approach. A lot of fun. Check that out as well. Mini Dungeon Tome 2.